Is cancel culture killing comedy? Actress Dame Maureen certainly thinks so. She was speaking on Giles Brander's podcast and she had this to say.
I think anger and comedy just go together hand in glove, don't they? You know, you think about Hancock and Robin Williams and all the great, all the comedians. You just things are not right, and comedy restores proportion, doesn't it? The one thing it does do, which is why it makes it so hard now when you can't look down on anybody, because actually most comedy is about somebody falling on a banana skin or being stupid or being foreign or being, well, you can't do any of that now, rightly or wrongly, so it's very hard, she said carefully, it's very hard to find material nowadays.
Now, Dame Maureen is also joining a host of comedians such as Ricky Gervais and Dave Chapelle, who have been critical of wokeness causing increased sensitivity in comedy. But should some jokes just be off limits, or is the fear of saying something that might offend ruining comedy? 0207 862 2222 is the number to give us a ring with your thoughts on this. Geoff, as a comedian, I'm going to start with you. Is cancel culture killing comedy?
Well, first I'll start with the good news, is that things are getting better now. Over the last couple of years, we've rediscovered the radical view that jokes are jokes, and sometimes they're not good, and people can be annoyed about a bad joke, but it doesn't necessarily mean you need to go and ruin someone's career. What I do think, one thing, I take issue with a couple of things Maureen Lipper said there. She said anger is important in comedy. I think irritation is funny. Somebody being irritated is hilarious. I promise you, if you go on stage angry about something, the audience will sort of think, all right, mate, it's a comedy show, So I disagree with that. Talk about jokes about foreigners. I think if you were trying to be charitable, is she talking about how do we discuss nationality, perhaps? I don't think any modern comedian would really want to just do a joke about a foreigner. But where she's possibly got a point is that there was a lost period in comedy. From that bit where social media, particularly when Twitter was particularly left-leaning, there was a period where jokes were taken to be something more than they were, and careers were affected, and that has, thankfully, changed a bit recently. But it's changed for the top guys, right? Like your Dave Chappelle's, your Ricky Gervais's. People with global audiences are uncancelable to a degree. There is still issues. They'll have a career. They'll have a career no matter what. They've got a global audience. They'll just pivot to podcasts, YouTube channels. You can't stop them having a presence. I'm not saying that they can say anything, but I'm saying that they can ride out the consequences. If I right now, we're on live telly, if there's certain words I could say, that would be it for me, because I'm at a level where it would be easy to go, well, this guy, he's not exactly in that league. People will sort of say that it doesn't exist, but at the Edinburgh Festival, I'm up there at the end of next month. Even last year, there was a show that was moved on from two venues because some of the comedians on it had gender-critical views, And the previous year, Jerry Sadovich's show was cancelled. Yeah. So let's not pretend it's completely gone away, but the good news is it is getting better.
But Jerry's show then went on to sell out to 40,000 people at the Apollo. So it's all about, I think, private...
But it still got cancelled by what's supposed to be a free speech arts festival.
But... I think there's a difference between an individual venue or a person saying, actually, I don't want to platform you, but you're free to go elsewhere.
That's what cancel culture is.
I would argue that cancel culture is somebody actually being cancelled from the industry rather than going, do you know what? Actually, you've got loads of different places you could go.
That's quite a high bar, isn't it? If you're saying cancel culture can only be somebody never, ever gets any public platform ever again, that very rarely happens to people. I think most people sort of understand it as a set of temporary consequences that might be disproportionate against what happened.
Isn't cancel culture hearing one thing and then making an assessment of the entire backlog of that person's comedy and that person
it's usually taken out of context. So there was a joke that Jimmy Carr did a year or so ago, and it was about the travelling community. Now, in it, he prefaced it by saying these are career enders. There was other context to it, but the way it became a news story was that somebody took it out of all the context, which was it was a show on Netflix that people had to choose to watch, and they boiled it down to 25 seconds. That was where the industry ran into problems, and there was definitely an issue over the last couple of years where people were afraid of their own shadow in comedy, and even people like Stephen Merchant, very reasonable guy, even he alluded to it.
He did, yeah. We're going to go to the calls. Daniel from Sheffield, do you think cancel culture is killing comedy?
Good morning, good afternoon, panel. Hope everyone is well. Good. As a gigging comic on the circuit, I also have quite a few nights here in Sheffield. And to start with, if I'm emceeing my own nights, if I'm hosting my own nights, I always have the disclaimer that this is an 18-plus night.
Yes.
That this is a night that's going to use expletives, there's going to be controversial subjects, there's going to be stuff that's probably going to make people wince a little bit. But the bottom line is, and I make a joke of it, I just usually say, if we have any snowflakes, stand up, walk out now, and we'll take the mickey out of you even more. And I think that is something
Daniel,
that we have to... Yes.
Daniel, there's a difference, isn't there, between somebody being a snowflake or somebody being upset and offended because the joke that is being told is derogatory to them because of the colour of their skin, for example, if it's a racist joke. It doesn't really... Just because you're over 18 doesn't mean that you're immune from having, racist jokes told about you, misogynistic jokes told about you. It's not about being a snowflake, is it?
No, I get that, but comedy's subjective, and one person's
and it's
funny,
okay
another
for people.
person's not.
And it's okay for people to say, actually, if the majority of your audience, for example, were trans people, and you had booked a comic who made lots of jokes that punched down at trans people, it would be understandable that your audience would be upset about that.
We're already in the realms of a subjective view there. So punchdown is very much in the eye of the beholder. And the spirit in which a joke comes from. So you take somebody like David Brent, for example. David Brent, a much-loved sort of mainstay of British comedy. A lot of what he says things are unacceptable. But the point of the joke is that he's an idiot, that he's not in step with his times.
But that's a character.
But what I mean is, so there's a spectrum on which you can make jokes about a subject, but it's all about perception.
Yes, totally.
But the punching up and punching down thing, I think, is interesting.
Who decides that?
And I also wonder whether, if you are making jokes where the butt of the joke is an oppressed group, you're punching down. If you are not from an oppressed group.
Who deliberately? But you could make a joke about a subject rather than against a person.
Yeah.
There is a distinction
And
between
you
those
could
two
make
things.
so for example, with David Brent, I would argue a lot of the times his character is the butt of the joke.
Yes.
When people say,
absolutely,
cancel culture is killing comedy, look at the longest running live sitcom of all time, which is It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, which has the worst jokes about race, gender identity, all that kind of stuff. But the joke is always on the person making it rather than the group.
The great thing, and this never changed, even in when cancel culture really was quite strident, is that live audiences are brilliant, right? They're fair and they run things very quickly through their mental processor. And if
their moral compass instantly reacts,
it absolutely
doesn't
does. And if you were punching down, that's a feeling that happens like immediately in the room, and people won't approve it generally in a modern audience. So there's an element of self-policing that goes on as well.
Daniel, thank you very much for your call. Though, William from London, what's your view when it comes to cancel culture killing comedy? Is it killing it, or is it just making it sharper?
No, it's some nonsense that is killing comedy. It's about comedians now having to be more clever and inventive. Many years ago, with Bernard Manning's the first name that springs to mind. It was all mother-in-law jokes. It was all, sort of racist jokes and stuff like that. And he was successful, but we live in different times. And the thing is, now you have to... I'll give you an example. I'm a joke writer. Things are definitely getting ramped up in America right now, which is great. Better wheelchair access. And I think that's, a sort of...
well, there's an example.
You have to... Sorry, but Ayesha Azarika made a great point earlier on when Jeremy was on. She said, you've got the whole world to choose from, to pick and choose where your humour lies. And funny is funny. I think the audience will either go with you or they'll go against you.
Well,
but
that's what Geoff was saying.
Yeah, I agree. One of the problems, William, I don't know if you've encountered this, is that people getting offended on behalf of someone. So that joke there was absolutely not about the fact that some people don't have use of their legs. It absolutely wasn't. The problem over the last 10 years, there'll be a tiny group of people, probably not wheelchair users, that would say, well, that was a joke about disability. And that's where I think comedy got knocked out of kilter. I do say, and I say it again, I think we're getting back to healthier territory now, where people are able to identify a joke is a joke, and when they don't work, it's uncomfortable. But that cringy feeling doesn't mean that somebody should be punished for it always.
But William, I suppose the joke that you just told there was funny because you weren't expecting that as a punchline, so there was an element of surprise to it. It was about people with disabilities, but they weren't the butt of the joke. In fact, it was lifting them up. It was saying we need more accessibility across the board. It was bringing up an issue in their plight.
No, I don't think it was offensive, but what I'm saying is there's always an army of offence takers that will try and read that into it, and often they don't even come from that.
But maybe this is what the nuance is that the punchline cannot be about an oppressed group of
it
people.
It shouldn't be about ridiculing.
It shouldn't be about bullying or ridiculing, but it could be about the subject. The subject can be involved. William, thank you very much for that. Thanks for the joke too. Sonia from Hertfordshire, what's your view on this one?
Well, you've just kind of confirmed what I was going to say actually there, Storm, which is about... No, that's absolutely fine. Thank you very much. Many years ago, I went to see Ricky Gervais at the Apollo, and it was really funny and I was enjoying it until he picked a topic which I thought was actually a bit insensitive, and it was about rape. And I looked around, thankfully I've never been in that situation, but I looked around and I immediately felt for, I don't know how many women in the audience, or even men, thinking, is this the right thing to be talking about? And as you said, it's not about him making a joke about himself. It was using an issue that could cause discomfort or mental breakdown for people.
Well, I
think perhaps...
I do wonder, Sonia, actually, because I don't know the joke and I don't know the context of it, so we don't need to get into that. But I appreciate you were offended by it, and obviously there's a huge percentage of women that have been affected by that issue and could be triggered by something like that. But I wonder whether with someone like Ricky Gervais's profile, and he is a fairly clever comedian, actually what he's done is bring up the issue and bring it up in a way that people can then discuss it.
Agreed. As an intellectual person, being a school teacher, I would hope that was the case. We're talking about over 25 years ago, when perhaps he wasn't so clever with his words, and perhaps he was doing a lot of it for effect.
Right.
And especially now, when you mentioned in the reel before, Maureen Lipman was saying about there was various people that are campaigning against. Obviously it's hard for a comedian. They've got to choose their material wisely nowadays. Even just as the general public, you have to be careful with what you say. Yeah. And as a comedian, you've got to be even more clever now to make sure that your material doesn't offend the individual, but you make fun of the person that you are, as opposed to, and people can laugh with it. So, for example, if there are jokes about people whom are homophobic, but the person saying the joke is, a homosexual, then he has a little bit more, or she has a little bit more right to say it because they're in that situation.
So I could take the mickey out of Scottish people, but if somebody else did it that wasn't Scottish, that would be maybe punching.
Well, I mean, I'm doing the Edinburgh Fringe. I will be taking the mickey out of various things. I mean, not Scottish people for what they are, but there
but that's different as well, because you're the one English person in a room full of
exactly right. So the joke is that I'm then dumb enough to do that at the Edinburgh Festival, which I absolutely am.
And I'll hold your coat, but I will not be there to rescue you. Sonia, thank you. Karen from the Scottish Borders, just a quick comment from you as well. Do you think cancel culture is killing comedy?
Yes, definitely. As I said to your colleague, I collect kind of so many kind of comedy records, like Peter Sellers, The Goons, Life of Brian, everything like that. And it's just such a shame that these days comedy isn't what it used to be.
You don't think it's as funny as it used to be? Do you not think sometimes that it's smarter, it's cleverer, like these restrictions and the cancel culture is putting pressure on comedians to be more intellectual about their comedy?
Oh, I totally agree on that. I say, because I've seen so many comedians, kind of Lee Evans, Bill Bailey, kind of people like that. And the worst one I went to see was was that Roy Brown? Roy Chubby Brown.
I thought you were going to say me then.
No.
I thought you were going to say
Long as
me.
it wasn't Geoff, we're all right. Okay, so you actually think that comedy's got worse and it's killing our sense of humour? I don't know so much. But anyway, we vote with our feet, we vote with our pockets. If you don't like it, don't get a ticket, don't go to the show. Karen, thank you very much for your call.